Access module number 2 with session number 1, building a database and defining table relationships. So we just came off of chapter number 2 with the theory idea with creating database models. So we're going to apply what we learned there to make modifications to improve the integrity of our tables. And then in session number 2, we're going to actually finally have the tables talk to each other in a database management system, meaning Microsoft Access. Okay, so I'm going to turn the page right here. Here are our objectives for session 1. And I'm going to focus kind of at the top right here in this video. So we're going to talk a little bit more about designing our tables, right? And then really narrowing them down so people can't enter in things that they're not supposed to. All right, in the overlay, which I love, hopefully you guys like these ones too. And remember, the green boxes are like your flashcards, and I put that in your Canvas study mate. So we'll talk a little bit more about that data sheet view versus the design view of your tables. We're really going to play a lot down in the bottom part where that's where all the properties are. And we're also going to play over on the other side with are helpful hints here and tells us as we click down on those field properties, what do they actually do, which is important, right? Because we want to make sure that we're locking things down. All right, let's talk a little bit about some guidelines before we get back to who we're working for in all of our Excel or Access modules, which is Donna. So guidelines. Okay, there are some very important things for guidelines, and the first one is before you get going with creating a table, you really should think about your field names. And what we're learning in our theory chapters that we're going to put the table name underscore and then the field name. And then the next part is to think about that data type. Each field should be organized into the smallest useful part, meaning we don't want a field that just says name. People can enter name so many weird ways, first name, comma, last name, comma, first name, space, middle initial, last name. Um, just so many weird ways, which makes it incredibly hard to then query that field, ask it a question like, give me all of the last names that begin with the letter A. Well, if last name was buried inside, plus had commas and spaces in there, it would be very difficult then to pull the filter out, to grab that of what you want to. So we want to go to the smallest part. So if it was a name, it should be 3 fields: first, middle, last. If it was a phone number, let's move it to 2 fields: area code, and then the other digits. Instead of just address, you should have like the street address and then the city and then the state, all of those different fields. Which I think it's important too to also make sure you know which field then should be your primary key. Remember, the one that cannot be null, because null, when you give a record a null value, that's really a value. And then you can query based on it being empty. And we will do that when we get to SQL too. So null is important. So the primary cannot be null, cannot be repeated, has to be unique. Now, a primary key, which we talked about in chapter number 3 theory, can be in some cases a composite key. Now, a composite key, now a composite key has to be something that, well, you can't find one field that is going to be unique, meaning no other records can be then the same. So how about combining a couple of the fields together? So either 2 fields or 3 fields or 4 fields. With these 4 fields together, then that record is unique and then cannot be repeated. So a composite key is introduced right here. And then I will talk about it further in our principles chapter 3 for the database. Okay, so that's the following week. All right, Let's make sure that we also can see that there are some common fields in these tables. So a common field is a foreign key because a common field is another field that appears in a different table. So when you see a field name, it appears in both tables and it's not an error, meaning they use that same name and it's two different concepts. It's the same concept, then we call it a common field in that. Last but not least, avoid data redundancy, meaning we do not want people to enter somebody's last name in multiple different tables. We would rather have an ID with that name so that way the ID shows up in another table. And then if you have to change someone's last name, you only have to change it in one table. Else it gets scary. It gets just can be a mess. So here's an example of incorrect design. So they have last name, first name, address with the patient ID here. And then if we look down in the next table, sure enough, they have patient ID, which would be a great way to connect the two, but last name is in here again. So if, let's say, Marjorie got married and her last name changed to Smith, I have to change Smith here. So when I read a report with the 1330 to connect to 13300, and it would pull Smith. No, no, no. Now I have to go into this table and change this one to be Smith also. That's horrible because who knows how many other places last name is. And we don't want that. We also, what we're going to do in this module is determine the properties or the characteristics of each field name, data type, minimum or maximum number of characters or digits, descriptions in there, any other thing like our input mask that we can create. Okay, let me turn the page again here. And this is again talking about naming our fields. And then this is where I was headed is the data types. Depending if you're in MySQL, SQL Server, Oracle, all these other different types of programming language and Access, they all have the same idea of data types, but they might name them a little bit different. So currently we're in Access, so we're going to take a look at what data types Access has. We have the short text. Short text is up to 255 characters. Long text, which used to be called the memo field, up to 65,000 characters, hence the name long text. We have the number, the time, the currency, auto number, yes, no, which you saw before when we were creating the tables in Module 1, and even hyperlink, plus there are more. There are more too. So we're going to start in with changing the field size, meaning limiting the number of characters or digits that someone can enter. We're also going to change, and let me just flip on down here, the caption property. So a caption property is a way that you can make a user-friendly name for your field, which would show up on your datasheet view, queries, forms, and reports. Now, if you don't set the caption, it just pulls the normal field name. Field names are what we use when we start crunching numbers, meaning it's called a calculated field. Instead of formulas or functions in Access, we call them expressions. I know, sounds kind of fancy, doesn't it? We express what we want to calculate. So we kind of want those fields to be short, sweet, descriptive, and no spaces. But if you're on your form, which is one record at a time, your computer, your data entry clerk would rather have a little bit more user friendly. So this is a way that we can keep the field name for us people in the background to crunch, but then the caption is the user friendly for the end users. We do not really want spaces in the actual field name. Okay. Caption lets you do have spaces. All right. Now, if you took a break and you can't find your file, please log back into Canvas and click on that second tab over in your one-stop shop Canvas page. Click on the second tab of task number 2, Learn, and there is a file there for you to download. Once you download it, it should look quite similar to this. And we want to, well, what we're going to do is we're going to work in the billing table. Donna would like us to really crunch some things down. So if I go back to the ebook, and let me just flip over a little bit more here. Donna wants us to do this. We've already created the fields and we already did the data type, but now we need to limit the field size, right? And not just do primary and foreign key, but we're going to relate more to what we're learning in our theory chapters and use PK and FK, and then do some other things again to keep the integrity of our tables. So I'm going to double click billing, right? And let's see. Here we go with our invoice number and all that good stuff in there. Now you can do a little bit of limiting things down when you go up to fields in here. There's a little bit in here that you can do because sure enough, there's our field size. But what I like to do is get all the bells and whistles, and I like to go into the design view. So this works as a toggle button, or you can hit that arrow down and go to the design view. Either way you want to go, like a toggle. See how now it changes the symbol? And then back to the design. Yeah, toggle. That's what I mean. All right, so first things first, we're going to change this to be PK. We're going to change this to be FK. Okay, and then as you click on your fields, the bottom part relates to what you have in the focus. So invoice number, we want to change this one to be only 5 characters. I'm going to tab on down to the caption. The caption, we're going to put invoice, and this time I'm going to put number. I'm going to spell it all out for that user. All right, let's go to the next field. So visit ID, right? We want this one to be 4. So I'm going to type in 4. I'm going to go right down to the caption, and notice on the right side how things change for me. This is visit ID. Now ask yourself, do you have to hit save if I got out of here? Yes. Remember, when you change the structure, you always have to hit save. When you change a record and the pencil disappears, it automatically saves. All right, we're going to go to the third one for invoice amount. We would like the, let's see, decimal places. Now, again, this is kind of weird. You have to click on them first. Keep your eyes over there to see that drop down. Once I click on it, I get my drop down. We want, whoops, not 1. We want 2, sorry. 2 decimal places on that. And then the caption is going to be invoice, and I'm going to spell the word out, amount. We could put a default value in there too if we want to. You know, that way when a new record begins, it automatically populates. Let's go to invoice date. Invoice date in here, we're going to change the format. So I'm going to click first, then hit my drop down in there. Isn't that lovely? I know. Now, as I do this, I'm just going to click off real quick, and then we're going to jump to the ebook. Now, the ebook, if I can flip over here really quick, let's see if I can do it this way. Oops, moving a field. We're not at moving a field yet. We're at dun dun dun. Not at saving. I think we're right in here. I want to go right on down to where it says, let's see if I can find this on here. There it is. That's what I'm looking for. I'm sorry. There are some formats that are already pre-populated for you, so you can just select some, but you also have a way to customize your date to contain a code, and these codes tell it what to pull. So the custom with 1D, this would give us instead of January, well, let's go to like November, right? So November would be 11, and that's the easy one. Let's go to like February. February would be a 2, but if we did DD, February would be O2. So 1 digit or 2 digits. If we do 3 digits, it spells the word out as abbreviation, no numbers. If we do 4, then it spells the word out completely. Nice, huh? Okay, and then we have more and more codes. So let me just open this up real quick. Now look, there's the YY or the 4 Ys, and the same thing as the Ds goes with the months. So how do you want your date to be formatted? It's really extremely, you can customize it. So I'm on invoice date, which is a date and time. Here's the format. I clicked on it, dropped it down, right? And then right inside here, I'm going to type in MM /DD. So I want numbers, but I always want the 0. And then YYYY. So it would give me that 2023 or 2024 and so on. All right, I'm going to click someplace else to keep it. I'm going to go to the caption. I'm going to spell out invoice space date. Remember, spaces are lovely in the caption. Spaces are not good when we do the field name. The field name is what we have to use when we crunch field versus field or field times field, which we will. All right, last one, invoice paid. This one is kind of a smaller amount of properties because it's a yes, no, but we would like a caption on that and say invoice space paid. Okay, click someplace else. All right, so do I need to save? Well, that's a good question again, and I just went over that, but always stop and ask yourself, do you need to save? And can you tell which one truly is the primary key? It's not because of the PK, it's because of that golden ticket, that golden key. So the answer is yes. Why? Because we changed the structure on it. All right, another thing I want to go over in our ebook, let me just close that and then flip on over. Whoops, went too far again. Let me scroll on down on here. And that's about this integrity. So as I'm scrolling on down, this one's a long page in here. Whew, there's those symbols again. All right, this one right here. Understanding the importance of our primary key. So yes, the primary key does all these lovely things. And it also does this too. When a primary key is designated, it forces you to enter a value. So if I entered a record and I left it empty, it would not, the pencil would not disappear. You get an error message. This is known as your entity integrity, okay? Because it's keeping the integrity of your table. Another word for your table is it's an entity because all the fields that are in this one table all have to relate to each other. Okay, now it has this value, and then I will teach you we have another type of integrity that's coming up in the soon future. So focus on this one first. All right, this is the end of this video, and then I'll be right back with the last part of this session.